Jesse Harding pressed his forehead against the dying mare's neck, his daughter's silent tears falling onto the straw beside him. 3 horses dead in 2 weeks. The cavalry contract, their last hope, would be gone by morning. "God, if you're still listening," he whispered into Willow's labored breathing. "I got nothing left to bargain with." The mayor shuddered. His 6-year-old Ella, who hadn't spoken since her mama died, reached for his hand. Outside, through the November snow, a stagecoach door slammed. Footsteps crunched toward the barn. A woman's voice, steady and sure, cut through the darkness. "That mare has strangles. I can save her, if you'll let me." Before we begin, if you believe in second chances and the power of quiet strength, subscribe to this channel. Stay until the end to see how one woman's knowledge changed everything. And comment below with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me tell you about the night everything changed at the Harding Ranch. The barn lantern flickered as Jesse Harding straightened his hand instinctively, moving to shield Ella. The woman standing in the doorway was small snow clinging to her dark wool coat, her breath forming clouds in the frozen air. She held a worn leather medical bag in one hand and a traveling case in the other. "Who are you?" Jesse's voice came out harder than he intended. "Catherine Brennan, from the Chicago Matrimonial Agency." She didn't look away from the mare. "But right now that doesn't matter. How long has she been symptomatic?" Jesse blinked. Symptomatic. Fever. Nasal discharge. Swollen lymph nodes under the jaw. Catherine set down her cases and moved toward Willow without waiting for permission. 4 days. 5. 6. Jesse admitted, stepping between her and the horse. "Miss Brennan, I don't know what the agency told you, but they told me you needed a wife. You wrote that you had a ranch in Montana, that you were a widower with a young daughter, and that you were tired of facing the frontier alone." Catherine's gray eyes finally met his. "What they didn't tell me was that your horses were dying, but I can hear it in that mare's breathing from across the yard." Ella tugged Jesse's sleeve, her dark eyes wide and questioning. She pointed at Catherine, then at Willow, then made a pleading gesture with both hands. "Your daughter wants me to help," Catherine said softly. "Will you let me try?" Jesse looked down at Ella, at the first real expression he'd seen on her face in months. Something desperate and hopeful all at once. "You got veterinary training?" he asked. "My father was a veterinarian in Chicago. I worked alongside him from the time I could read until the day he died." Catherine knelt beside Willow, her hands already moving with practiced confidence. "This is strangles. Highly contagious bacterial infection. If we don't isolate the sick horses and treat them properly, you'll lose the entire herd within 3 weeks." Jesse's stomach dropped. "The entire herd? Have other horses shown symptoms? 2 died last week. Another 3 are coughing in the far stalls." Catherine closed her eyes briefly. "Then we're already behind. I need hot water, clean cloths, and if you have any medicinal supplies, whiskey, turpentine, linseed oil, bring them. Now." There was no question in her voice. No hesitation. Just the calm authority of someone who'd done this 100 times before. Jesse found himself moving before he'd consciously decided to obey. "Ella, go wake Mrs. Chen. Tell her we need hot water. Quick now." Ella darted out of the barn, the first purposeful movement she'd made in days. "Mrs. Chen?" Catherine asked, opening her medical bag. "Chinese widow. Lives in the bunkhouse, helps with cooking and mending." Jesse grabbed a stack of clean stable cloths from the shelf. "Been with us since my wife since 2 years ago." Catherine's hands paused for just a moment. "I'm sorry for your loss. Don't need your sympathy. Need to know if you can actually do what you claim." "Fair enough." She pulled out a small brown journal, its pages worn soft with use. "This was my father's field book. Every case he treated in 30 years. Strangles is on page 47. I've seen it kill entire racing stables in Kentucky, and I've seen it cured with nothing but patience and proper drainage." Jesse watched as she flipped through the journal, her fingers finding the page without looking. The handwriting was tight and precise, accompanied by detailed anatomical drawings. "Your father taught you all this." "He didn't have sons." Catherine's voice carried no bitterness, just fact. "So he taught his daughter instead. The Chicago Veterinary College wouldn't admit me because of my gender, but I learned more at my father's side than most of their graduates ever will." Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, Ella close behind her, both carrying steaming buckets. "Mr. Jesse, what is happening?" The older woman's eyes went from the dying mare to the stranger kneeling beside it. "This is Miss Brennan. She's—" Jesse faltered. "She says she can help." Catherine looked up at Mrs. Chen and spoke in perfect Mandarin. Jesse caught only a few words, but Mrs. Chen's face transformed from suspicion to surprise to cautious respect. "She knows the old medicine ways," Mrs. Chen said in English, setting down the bucket. "Her father learned from Chinese horse doctors in San Francisco." "Is that true?" Jesse asked. Catherine was already soaking cloths in the hot water. "My father believed healing knowledge belonged to whoever could use it best. He learned from everyone willing to teach Chinese herbalists Lakota medicine, men Irish farriers. He said the horses didn't care about the color of the hands that helped them." She pressed the hot compress against the swollen lymph nodes under Willow's jaw. The mare flinched, but didn't pull away. "This will hurt her," Catherine said, pulling a small scalpel from her bag. "But the abscesses need to drain, or the infection will spread to her lungs. Mr. Harding, I'll need you to hold her head steady. Mrs. Chen, keep the compresses coming. Ella." She looked at the little girl. "Can you talk to Willow? Keep her calm?" Ella's eyes went wide. She shook her head frantically. "That's all right," Catherine said gently. "You don't have to use words. Horses understand touch better anyway. Just put your hand here on her neck and let her feel that someone loves her. Can you do that?" Ella hesitated, then slowly reached out. Her small hand rested against Willow's neck, and something in the mare's labored breathing seemed to ease. "Perfect," Catherine whispered. "Now, Mr. Harding, hold very still." What happened next took less than 3 minutes but felt like an hour. Catherine's hands moved with surgical precision, lancing the abscesses, draining the infection, cleaning the wounds, with a solution that smelled of carbolic acid and something herbal Jesse couldn't identify. Willow thrashed once, but Jesse held firm, and Ella's hand never left the mare's neck. When it was done, Catherine sat back on her heels, blood and pus staining her sleeves. "She'll need this treatment twice daily for a week," she said, binding the wounds with clean cloth. "And she stays isolated from the other horses. I'll need to examine every animal in your barn tonight. The ones showing symptoms get the same treatment. The ones that aren't sick yet get moved to a separate paddock immediately." Jesse stared at her. "Tonight, Miss Brennan, it's past midnight, and you just got off a stagecoach. You must be—" "I'm fine." Catherine stood wiping her hands on a cloth. "Disease doesn't wait for convenience, Mr. Harding. If we don't move fast, you'll lose horses that could have been saved. Now, how many animals are we talking about?" 23 horses total, 5 showing symptoms, 18 still healthy." "Then we have work to do." Catherine picked up her bag. "Mrs. Chen, I'll need more hot water, and if you have any Yunnan Baiyao powder that would help with the wound healing." Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose. "You know Yunnan Baiyao? My father swore by it. Said it was the best coagulant he'd ever used." A slow smile crossed Mrs. Chen's face. "I have some. I will bring it." As Mrs. Chen left, Jesse found his voice. "Miss Brennan, I appreciate what you just did, but we need to talk about why you're here, about the arrangement." Catherine was already moving toward the next stall. "Mr. Harding, I traveled 1,800 miles to get here. I'm not going anywhere tonight. We can discuss arrangements after we save your horses, unless you'd rather I leave and let them die." "That's not what I—" "Then show me the sick ones." For the next 4 hours, Jesse Harding watched Catherine Brennan work with a focus and skill that left him speechless. She examined each horse with thorough care, her hands moving over their bodies with practiced efficiency, her journal never far from reach. She spoke to each animal in soft, reassuring tones, explaining what she was doing, as if they could understand. 2 more horses had early-stage strangles. Catherine treated them immediately, showing Jessie and Mrs. Chen exactly how to prepare the compresses, how to lance the abscesses when they came to a head, how to prevent the infection from spreading to the respiratory system. "The key is drainage," she explained, binding another wound. "The bacteria produces pus-filled abscesses. If they rupture internally, the horse drowns in its own infection. But if we drain them externally and keep the wounds clean, most horses survive." "Most?" Jessie asked. "Strangles has a 20% mortality rate even with treatment. Without it," she met his eyes. "80%. You've already lost 2 horses, Mr. Harding. How many more can you afford to lose?" Jessie thought of the cavalry contract of the payment that was supposed to arrive in 3 weeks for 20 healthy horses. Thought of the banknote coming due in January of Ella's future, of everything that depended on this herd surviving. "None," he said quietly. "I can't afford to lose a single one." "Then you won't." Catherine's voice carried absolute certainty. "Not if we do this right." By the time the first gray light touched the Montana sky, every sick horse had been treated, and every healthy horse had been moved to a separate paddock a quarter-mile from the barn. Catherine had shown Jessie how to mix the herbal poultices, how to recognize the early signs of infection, how to keep detailed records of each animal's condition. She worked without complaint, without rest, her focus never wavering, even as exhaustion began to show in the lines around her eyes. Finally, as the sun broke over the eastern mountains, Jessie said, "Miss Brennan, you need to stop. You've been working for 5 hours straight." Catherine was cleaning her instruments, her movements methodical, despite her obvious fatigue. "Almost done." "You're swaying on your feet." "I'm fine." "You're not." Jessie took the scalpel from her hand before she could protest. "Mrs. Chen's making breakfast. You're going to eat, and then you're going to sleep. That's not a request." Catherine looked up at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he saw vulnerability in her face. The determined mask slipped, revealing the exhaustion and uncertainty beneath. "I don't have anywhere to sleep," she said quietly. "I didn't think when I came here, I didn't think past getting here. I just knew I had to leave Chicago, and your letter seemed like—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. Jessie felt something shift in his chest. This woman had walked into his barn like a force of nature, had worked through the night to save his horses, had asked for nothing in return. And now she stood before him, homeless and exhausted, trying not to show how afraid she was. "The main house has a spare room," he heard himself say. "It was my wife's sewing room. Small, but it's got a bed and a stove. You can stay there." "I don't want charity, Mr. Harding." "It's not charity. You just saved my herd. That's worth a room and meals at minimum." He paused. "We can talk about the rest later, after you've slept." Catherine studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether he meant it. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you." Mrs. Chen met them at the main house, a knowing look in her eyes. "I prepare room already," she said, leading Catherine up the stairs. "Bath water heating. You need clean clothes. I have my own, thank you." Jessie stood in the kitchen, listening to their footsteps overhead, trying to understand what had just happened to his carefully ordered life. 6 hours ago, he'd been preparing to lose everything. Now, a stranger was sleeping in his dead wife's sewing room, and his horses had a fighting chance at survival. Ella tugged at his sleeve. She pointed upstairs, then made a questioning gesture. "Miss Brennan's going to stay for a while," Jessie said, crouching down to his daughter's level. "She's going to help the horses get better. Is that all right with you?" Ella nodded solemnly. Then she did something that stopped Jessie's heart. She smiled. Just a small curve of her lips, but it was the first smile he'd seen since Sarah died. "Yeah," he whispered, pulling his daughter close. "I think it might be all right." That afternoon, Jesse rode into Silver Creek to send a telegram and pick up supplies. The general store was busy with Saturday shoppers, and he felt eyes on him the moment he walked in. Jesse Harding. Clara Whitman called from near the fabric counter. "Haven't seen you in town for weeks. How's that poor little girl of yours?" "Ella's fine, thank you." "Still not talking?" Jesse's jaw tightened. "She'll talk when she's ready." "Such a shame. A child that age should be chattering like a magpie." Clara exchanged glances with the other women. Of course, without a mother's influence. "Mrs. Whitman, I need to place a supply order. Excuse me." He moved toward the counter where Tom Bradley, the store owner, was tallying receipts. "Jesse," Tom said with genuine warmth, "what can I do for you?" Jesse pulled out the list Catherine had written in her precise handwriting. "Need these items. Some of them might be special order." Tom scanned the list, his eyebrows rising. "Carbolic acid linseed oil. This is veterinary stock. Your horse is sick. Had some strangles in the herd. Getting it under control." "Strangles." Clara had moved closer, her voice carrying across the store. "Jesse, that's serious. Did you call for the veterinarian from Bozeman?" "Didn't need to. Got help already." "From whom?" Jesse hesitated, knowing what was coming. "A woman named Catherine Brennan. She's got veterinary training. Been treating the horses since last night." The store went quiet. Clara's expression shifted from concern to something harder. "A woman veterinarian." She said the words like they contradicted each other. "Jesse, that's where did you find this person?" "She came through the matrimonial agency." The silence deepened. Then Clara laughed a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You ordered a mail-order bride who claims to be a veterinarian, Jesse dear. That's the oldest con in the West. These women will say anything to find a husband. She's probably never been near a sick horse in her life." "She saved my mare last night. Lanced abscesses, treated infection, knew exactly what she was doing." "Or got lucky." Clara's voice turned pitying. "Jesse, I know you're desperate for help with Ella, but bringing a strange woman into your home based on lies, that poor child has been through enough without—" "Mrs. Whitman." Jesse's voice went cold. "I appreciate your concern, but Miss Brennan's qualifications aren't your business. Tom, how soon can you get these supplies?" Tom cleared his throat. "Day after tomorrow for most of it. The carbolic acid might take a week. I'll take what you can get now, and the rest when it comes in." As Jesse paid, he felt the weight of judgment from every corner of the store. By nightfall, everyone in Silver Creek would know that desperate Jesse Harding had brought home a mail-order bride who claimed to be a horse doctor. They'd be laughing about it over dinner, shaking their heads at his foolishness. Let them, Jesse thought grimly. Catherine Brennan had done more in one night than all their sympathy and advice had accomplished in 2 years. When he returned to the ranch, he found Catherine in the isolation paddock checking on the sick horses. She'd changed into a simple brown work dress, her hair pulled back in a practical braid. She moved from horse to horse with quiet efficiency, making notes in her father's journal. "How are they?" Jesse asked, joining her at the fence. "Willow's fever broke. That's a good sign. The others are stable." Catherine closed the journal. "I'll need to treat them again this evening. The abscesses should start draining properly by tomorrow." "I got most of your supplies. Some will take a few days." "That's fine. We can work with what we have." Jesse leaned against the fence watching the horses. "Town's talking. About you being here." "I imagine they are. They don't believe you know what you're doing, think you're running some kind of con." Catherine's expression didn't change. "Do you think that—" "No. Then their opinions don't matter." She turned to face him. "Mr. Harding, I know this isn't what you expected when you contacted the agency. I know having a stranger show up claiming veterinary skills sounds absurd, but I also know your horses are improving, and that's the only proof that matters." Jesse studied her face, the calm certainty, the quiet strength. "Why'd you really come here, Miss Brennan Truth?" Catherine looked out at the snow-covered mountains, her hands gripping the journal. In Chicago, there was a man, Tobias Thornton. He owned the pharmacy where my father bought his supplies. When my father died, he left debts, medical bills, equipment costs. Mr. Thornton offered to forgive the debts if I'd marry him. But you didn't want to. He was 40 years older than me. He wanted a housekeeper and a nurse, not a wife. And he wanted me to stop practicing veterinary medicine. Said it wasn't proper for a woman. Her voice hardened. When I refused, he made sure every door in Chicago closed to me. No one would hire me. No one would rent me a room. He wanted to force my hand. So you ran. I chose freedom over a cage. Is that running? Catherine met his eyes. Your letter said you were tired of facing the frontier alone, that you needed someone who understood hard work and wasn't afraid of it. I needed somewhere Mr. Thornton's influence couldn't reach. It seemed like we might be able to help each other. Jessie absorbed this understanding dawning. You paid your own way here, didn't you? The agency said I never sent the fee. I had some money saved, not much but enough for passage. And if I'd turned you away? A shadow crossed Catherine's face. I'd have figured something out. I always do. Jessie shook his head slowly. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most foolish. Maybe both. A faint smile touched her lips. My father used to say the only difference between bravery and foolishness is whether it works out in the end. And has it worked out? Catherine looked at the horses at the ranch spread out before them, at the mountains rising into the winter sky. Ask me again when your herd is healthy, she said quietly. That evening they treated the horses together, falling into an easy rhythm. Catherine showed Jessie exactly what to do, her instructions clear and patient. Ella sat nearby, watching with intense focus, occasionally pointing out things Catherine had missed. A horse favoring its left leg, another showing signs of anxiety. Your daughter has good instincts, Catherine said as they finished with the last horse. She understands animals. Jessie looked at Ella, who was gently stroking a young gelding's nose. Her mama used to bring her to the barn every day. Said horses could teach children things people couldn't. Patience, gentleness, respect. Your wife was wise. She was. Jessie paused. Sarah died of scarlet fever. Came on fast, took her in 3 days. Ella stopped talking the day we buried her. Haven't heard her voice since. Catherine's hand stilled on the horse she was examining. I'm sorry. That's a terrible burden for a child to carry. Dr. Bozeman says she'll talk when she's ready. That pushing won't help. He's right. Grief has its own timeline. Catherine looked at Ella. But she's still communicating. Through her actions, her expressions. She's not silent, she's just using a different language. Jessie felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. I never thought of it that way. My father treated a boy once who'd been kicked by a horse. Couldn't speak for a year afterward. But he could still draw, still write, still make himself understood. My father said the boy wasn't broken, he was just finding a new way to be whole. Did he ever talk again? Eventually. But what mattered more was that everyone stopped waiting for him to be who he was before and started seeing who he was becoming. Jessie looked at his daughter, really looked at her. Saw not the absence of words, but the presence of everything else. The way she gentled the horses, the way she watched Catherine with curiosity and trust, the way she'd smiled that morning for the first time in 2 years. Thank you, he said quietly. Catherine glanced at him surprised. For what? For seeing her. Really seeing her. Something soft crossed Catherine's face. She's easy to see, Mr. Harding. She's extraordinary. They walked back to the house as the sun set, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. Mrs. Chen had dinner waiting venison stew and fresh bread. They ate together at the kitchen table, Ella between Jessie and Catherine, the silence comfortable rather than strained. After dinner, Catherine excused herself to her room, and Jessie found himself at loose ends. He usually spent evenings reading to Ella from the Bible or from Sarah's collection of poetry books, but tonight felt different, changed. Ella tugged his sleeve and pointed upstairs. You want to see if Miss Brennan needs anything? Ella nodded firmly. Jesse climbed the stairs, Ella close behind. He knocked softly on the sewing room door. Come in. Catherine sat by the window, her father's journal open in her lap, a single candle providing light. She'd let her hair down, and it fell in dark waves past her shoulders. Ella wanted to check on you, Jesse said. Ella slipped past him and went straight to Catherine, holding out a piece of paper. It was a drawing rough but recognizable. A woman with dark hair kneeling beside a horse, a little girl watching. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Ella, this is beautiful. Is this from today? Ella nodded, then pointed at Catherine, then at the horses, then pressed both hands over her heart. She's saying thank you. Jesse translated his own throat tight. For helping Willow. Catherine knelt down to Ella's level. You're welcome, sweetheart, but you helped too. Willow knew you were there, and that mattered. Ella smiled that same small, precious smile from the morning, and then did something that made Jesse's breath catch. She hugged Catherine quick and fierce before darting back to her father's side. Catherine stood slowly wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, Jesse said roughly. She hasn't hugged anyone except me since Sarah died. You're doing something right, Miss Brennan. They stood there, the three of them in the small room that smelled of cedar and old fabric, and Jesse felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 2 years. Hope. Not the desperate clawing hope of a drowning man, but the quiet, steady hope of someone who sees a path forward through the darkness. We should let you rest, he said finally. Mr. Harding. Catherine's voice stopped him at the door. I know we haven't discussed the terms of my staying here, the arrangement. But I want you to know I don't expect anything beyond room and board while I'm helping with the horses. You don't owe me anything. Jesse turned back. You walked through a snowstorm to get here, then worked through the night to save my livelihood. I'd say I owe you considerably more than room and board. I didn't do it for payment. I did it because those horses needed help, and I could provide it. I know. That's what makes it worth paying for. Jesse paused. Get some rest, Miss Brennan. Tomorrow we'll talk about making this arrangement official, if you're willing. Catherine's eyes widened slightly. You mean? I mean you came here to be my wife, and I contacted the agency looking for one. Seems foolish to pretend otherwise when we're both here for the same reason. But you don't know me. I know you're skilled, honest, and brave. I know my daughter trusts you, and my horses are healing because of you. I know you need a place where Thornton can't reach you, and I need help I can depend on. He met her eyes steadily. Seems like we both know enough to make an informed decision. Catherine stood very still, the candlelight casting shadows across her face. This isn't a love match, Mr. Harding. No, but it's honest. That counts for something. It counts for a great deal, she said softly. All right, we'll talk tomorrow, after the morning treatments. Jesse nodded and ushered Ella out, closing the door behind them. As he tucked his daughter into bed, Ella looked up at him with questions in her eyes. She pointed at her own hand, then made a ring gesture. You asking if Miss Brennan's going to stay? Become part of our family? Ella nodded. Maybe, sweetheart. If she wants to. If we can make it work. Would you like that? Ella's answer was to burrow into his arms and hold on tight, her way of saying yes to the possibility of not being alone anymore. Jesse held his daughter and stared out at the snow falling soft against the window. Somewhere in the barn, horses that had been dying were fighting their way back to health. Somewhere down the hall, a woman who'd fled one kind of prison sat writing in her dead father's journal, building a new life. One careful note at a time. And somewhere in Jesse's chest, something long frozen began very slowly to thaw. He didn't know if it was love, didn't know if it ever would be, but it was something. And after 2 years of nothing, something felt like everything. Morning came cold and clear, the kind of Montana winter dawn that turned everything sharp-edged and crystalline. Jessie was already in the barn when Catherine arrived, her medical bag in one hand and her father's journal in the other. She'd braided her hair tight against her head, all business, but there were shadows under her eyes that said she hadn't slept much. "You're up early," Jessie said, looking up from mucking out the isolation stalls. "So are you." Catherine set down her bag and moved immediately to Willow's stall. The mare raised her head, ears forward, and Catherine's face transformed. "Oh, look at you. Your eyes are clear." Jessie came to stand beside her. Willow did look better. The frantic, pain-glazed look was gone, replaced by something closer to normal horse curiosity. The swelling under her jaw had reduced noticeably overnight. "The drainage worked," Catherine murmured, running expert hands over the mare's lymph nodes. "The infection's retreating. See here, the tissue's cooler to the touch, less inflamed. Another 3 days of treatment and she'll be out of danger entirely." 3 days seems fast for something that was killing her yesterday. Strangles responds quickly to proper treatment. The key is catching it before it moves to the lungs. Catherine was already preparing fresh compresses. The horses that died, had they shown respiratory symptoms, pneumonia? Jessie thought back, his chest tightening. "Yeah, couldn't breathe right toward the end. I thought it was just part of the sickness." "It was, the worst part." Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. "That's why we can't let up now. Every treatment matters. Every day we're aggressive with this, we save lives." They worked in silence for a while, the rhythm already familiar. Catherine handled the medical aspects while Jessie managed the physical labor, holding horses steady, heating water, cleaning stalls. It was partnership without negotiation, each of them falling into the role that fit. Ella appeared in the barn doorway just as they finished with the third horse. She wore her mother's old coat, too big on her small frame, and carried a basket that smelled like fresh biscuits. "Mrs. Chen sent breakfast," Catherine said, smiling. "Thank you, sweetheart." Ella set the basket on a hay bale and immediately went to Willow's stall. She pressed her face against the bars, and the mare came over to nuzzle her hand. "She knows you helped her," Jessie said quietly. "Horses remember kindness." Ella looked at her father, then at Catherine, and something passed between them, some wordless understanding that made the child's face glow. Catherine pulled out a biscuit and handed it to Ella. "These need butter. Think you can run back and get some?" Ella nodded and scampered off, her footsteps fading across the frozen ground. "You sent her away on purpose," Jessie observed. "I did." Catherine turned to face him fully. "Last night you said we'd talk about making this arrangement official. I wanted to do that without an audience." Jessie set down the pitchfork he'd been holding. "Fair enough. What do you want to know? What you expect? From a wife?" The directness caught him off guard. Most women he knew would have danced around the subject, but Catherine just stood there, waiting for an honest answer. "I expect honesty," Jessie said after a moment. "I expect you to pull your weight on this ranch, which you're already doing. I expect you to treat Ella with kindness, which you've shown. Beyond that—" He shrugged. "I'm not looking for romance, Miss Brennan. I had that with Sarah. It was good, and it's gone. I'm looking for a partner, someone who can stand beside me in the hard times and not break." "And the personal aspects of marriage." Jessie felt heat creep up his neck. "We can figure that out as we go. No pressure, no expectations beyond respect and privacy. This doesn't have to be anything you're not comfortable with." Catherine studied him for a long moment. In Chicago, Mr. Thornton made it clear what he expected. A wife to warm his bed, keep his house, bear his children, and ask no questions about his business. He wanted ownership, not partnership. "I'm not Thornton." "I'm beginning to understand that." Catherine's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I should tell you, I'm 29 years old. Most men would consider that too old for bearing children. I've got Ella. Don't need more children. If we have them, fine. If we don't, that's fine too. And my work? The veterinary practice. Jesse almost laughed. Miss Brennan, you're saving my ranch. You think I'd ask you to stop? Most men would. Then most men are fools. Jesse crossed his arms. Let me be clear about something. You've got knowledge I need and skills this ranch needs. Far as I'm concerned, you can treat every sick animal in Montana Territory if that's what you want. I won't stand in your way. Catherine's eyes shone suspiciously bright. You mean that? Every word. She nodded once, sharp and decisive. Then yes, I'll marry you, Jesse Harding, under those terms. Jesse extended his hand. Catherine took it, her grip firm and sure. They shook on it like business partners sealing a deal, which in a way they were. We'll go to town Monday, Jesse said. Get the paperwork done at the courthouse. Reverend Cole can do the ceremony if you want something religious. Monday's fine. The ceremony doesn't need to be elaborate, just legal and binding. Agreed. Jesse released her hand. One more thing. I know you're running from Thornton. If he comes looking, if he shows up here, I'll handle it. You're under my protection now. That's not negotiable. Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. Thank you. Ella came racing back with the butter, and the moment passed. They ate breakfast in the barn, sitting on hay bales, while the horses moved peacefully in their stalls. It was simple and companionable, and Jesse found himself thinking that this quiet partnership might actually work. The rest of the week fell into a pattern. Catherine treated the horses twice daily, her methods proving effective beyond Jesse's wildest hopes. The sick animals improved steadily, the healthy ones stayed healthy. She kept meticulous records in her father's journal, noting every symptom, every treatment, every small victory. Jesse watched her work with growing respect. She was tireless, precise, and utterly fearless. He saw her reach into a horse's mouth to check for throat abscesses without hesitation, saw her lance infected wounds that would have made most men queasy, saw her spend hours sitting with a feverish gelding just to make sure he kept breathing. And Ella. Ella bloomed under Catherine's quiet attention. The woman never pushed the child to speak, never treated her silence as something wrong that needed fixing. Instead, she talked to Ella like an equal, explaining what she was doing with the horses, asking for help with small tasks, accepting Ella's drawings and gestures as valid communication. 3 days after Catherine's arrival, Jesse came into the barn to find Ella and Catherine sitting together on a blanket, the journal open between them. Catherine was reading aloud from one of the case studies, and Ella was following along with her finger completely absorbed. Your grandfather treated a horse like this in Kentucky, Catherine was saying. See here. He writes that the owner thought the horse was just old and tired, but your grandfather noticed the gums were pale, knew immediately it was anemia from parasites. Simple treatment, wormwood tincture and better feed, and the horse lived another 8 years. Ella pointed to a drawing in the margin, a detailed sketch of a horse's digestive system. That's right, he drew all these himself. He said you couldn't understand how to heal something unless you understood how it worked. He used to say, Catherine paused, her voice catching. He used to say that every living thing was a miracle of engineering, and the least we could do was learn the blueprints before we started making repairs. Jesse leaned against the doorway, something warm unfurling in his chest. His daughter's face was lit with fascination, her small hands careful on the delicate pages. When was the last time he'd seen her so engaged? Catherine looked up and caught him watching. We're not disturbing you. Not at all. I just came to check on the afternoon treatments. Already done. Everything's stable. Catherine closed the journal carefully. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. That gelding in the far paddock, the gray one with the white blaze. Thunder. What about him? He's favoring his right foreleg. Not obvious, but I noticed him shifting his weight. I'd like to examine him properly. Jesse frowned. Thunder was one of his best horses, a 4-year-old with excellent bloodlines. I haven't noticed anything wrong. It's subtle. Probably just a stone bruise or a mild sprain. But if it's something more serious and we catch it early, We can prevent permanent damage. All right, let's take a look. They walked out to the healthy paddock together, Ella trailing behind. Thunder was grazing near the fence, and he came over when Jessie whistled, clearly expecting treats. Catherine ran her hands down each of Thunder's legs, feeling for heat or swelling. When she got to the right foreleg, she pressed gently on the hoof, and the gelding flinched. There, Catherine said. Sensitivity in the hoof. Could be an abscess forming, or he might have bruised the sole. We'll need to soak it and see if it drains. Jessie shook his head in amazement. How did you even notice that he's barely limping? My father taught me to watch how animals move when they think no one's looking. They hide pain when they're nervous or excited, but when they're relaxed and grazing, their true condition shows. Catherine straightened. You've got good instincts, Ella. You're the one who pointed him out to me yesterday, remember? You noticed he wasn't putting full weight on that leg. Ella's face lit up with pride. She did. Jessie looked at his daughter with new respect. She's been helping me observe all the horses. She's got a real gift for reading their body language. Catherine smiled at Ella. You'd make an excellent veterinary assistant. Ella beamed and immediately started making hand gestures, pointing to Catherine, to the horses, to herself, then making a circle with her fingers. She's asking if she can help more, Jessie translated. If she can learn what you're teaching. Catherine knelt down to Ella's level. Would you like that? To learn about animal medicine? Ella nodded so hard her braids bounced. Then yes, absolutely. We'll start tomorrow. I'll teach you everything your grandfather wrote in his journal and everything my father taught me. Deal. Ella threw her arms around Catherine's neck, and Jessie had to turn away to hide the sudden burning in his eyes. His daughter was happy. Really, truly happy. For the first time since Sarah's death. That evening, after they'd treated Thunder's hoof and settled all the horses for the night, Jessie found Catherine in the kitchen helping Mrs. Chen prepare dinner. The two women were speaking in a mixture of English and Mandarin, laughing about something he didn't catch. Mr. Jessie, Mrs. Chen said when she spotted him. Miss Catherine knows my mother's recipe for ginger chicken. She learned from Chinese doctor in San Francisco. Did she now? Catherine looked slightly embarrassed. My father's mentor was a man named Dr. Chen. No relation to Mrs. Chen here. He practiced both human and veterinary medicine, and he believed food was the first medicine. He taught my father about herbal remedies and proper nutrition for healing. So you know human medicine too? Some. Enough to treat basic injuries and illnesses. My father wanted me to have options if the veterinary work didn't pan out. Catherine stirred something that smelled incredible. Though treating people is harder than treating animals. Animals don't argue with you or ignore your advice. Jessie laughed. That's fair. They ate dinner together, the four of them, and Jessie was struck by how natural it felt. Mrs. Chen had been keeping house for him for 2 years, but it had always felt temporary, like they were all just waiting for real life to resume. This felt different, like pieces falling into place. After dinner, Ella brought out her slate and chalk. She drew a picture and showed it to Catherine, a simple courthouse with 2 stick figures standing in front of it. Monday, Catherine said softly. You're asking about Monday when your father and I go to town. Ella nodded, then pointed to herself and made a questioning gesture. You want to come with us? Another nod. Catherine looked at Jessie. Is that all right? Of course, she should be there. It's her family too. Ella's face broke into a huge smile. She drew another figure on the slate, smaller, child-sized, standing between the 2 adults. Then she drew a heart above all 3 figures. Jessie's throat closed up completely. He had to step outside for a moment, standing on the porch in the freezing air, trying to compose himself. Behind him, he heard Catherine's gentle voice explaining to Ella about wedding ceremonies, about what it meant to become a family. The door opened, and Catherine stepped out, wrapping her shawl tight against the cold. She's drawing more pictures inside, Catherine said. I think she's planning the whole day in her head. She's happy, Jessie managed. I haven't seen her this happy since... I know. They stood in comfortable silence watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I'm scared," Catherine admitted suddenly. "Of Monday. Of making this real and permanent." Having second thoughts. "No, just scared." She turned to look at him. "I've never been married. Never been part of a real family. What if I'm no good at it?" Jesse thought about that. "I've been married. Lost my wife. Spent 2 years failing to help my daughter. I'm terrified too. But maybe that's all right. Maybe being scared just means we understand what we're risking." "And what are we risking?" "Everything," Jesse said honestly. "But we're already risking everything just by being alive out here. At least this way we're not doing it alone." Catherine smiled, small but genuine. "That's true enough." Monday morning arrived too fast and too slow all at once. Jesse put on his best suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, and tried not to think about the irony. Catherine wore a simple gray dress that she'd altered to fit better, her hair pinned up in a neat bun. Ella insisted on wearing her Sunday dress, the blue one with white flowers that Sarah had made. Mrs. Chen packed them lunch and pressed a small bundle into Catherine's hands. "For good fortune," she said. "Chinese wedding tradition, red ribbon and sweet rice cakes." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, that's incredibly kind." "You are good woman. Mr. Jesse is lucky man. Now go, make official." The ride into Silver Creek took an hour. Ella sat between Jesse and Catherine, on the wagon bench, bundled in blankets, her eyes bright with excitement. Catherine was quiet, her hands folded in her lap, and Jesse could see the tension in her shoulders. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "Ask me after it's done." The courthouse was a modest building on Main Street, sharing space with the land office. Judge Morrison handled all the civil ceremonies, and his wife served as witness. Jesse had sent word ahead, so they were expected. They were halfway up the courthouse steps when a voice called out, "Jesse Harding? Heard you were doing something foolish today." Jesse turned to see Clara Whitman and 2 other townswomen approaching, their faces set with what they probably thought was concern. "Mrs. Whitman," Jesse said evenly, "we're just here for a civil ceremony, nothing foolish about it. Marrying a woman you've known for less than a week, a woman who claims veterinary skills she couldn't possibly have." Clara's eyes swept over Catherine with barely concealed disdain. "Jesse, dear, I know you're lonely, but this is madness. What will people think?" Catherine stepped forward before Jesse could respond. "Mrs. Whitman, I appreciate your concern for Mr. Harding's well-being, but I assure you, I have the qualifications I claim. If you'd like verification, I can provide references from the Chicago Veterinary Society, where my father was a founding member." "A woman can't be a member of the Veterinary Society," one of the other women scoffed. "I didn't say I was a member. I said my father was, Dr. James Brennan. Perhaps you've heard of him." Clara's expression flickered. Even here in Montana, James Brennan's name carried weight in veterinary circles. "That may be," Clara said stiffly, "but it doesn't change the fact that you're rushing into this marriage unseemly fast. It's barely been 2 years since Sarah passed." "Mrs. Whitman." Jesse's voice went cold. "I don't recall asking for your permission or your blessing. My personal decisions aren't your concern. That child's well-being is everyone's concern." Clara pointed at Ella. "She's been through enough without you bringing a stranger into her life." That's when Ella did something that shocked everyone. She stepped in front of Catherine, placing herself between the woman and Clara Whitman. Her small face was fierce protective. She pointed at Catherine, then at herself, then made a heart shape with her hands. "Ella likes her," Jesse said quietly. "Ella trusts her, and my daughter's opinion matters more to me than yours ever will." Clara's face flushed red. "Well, I can see you've made up your mind. Don't come crying to me when this arrangement falls apart." "Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am." Clara swept away with her companions, leaving Jesse and Catherine standing on the courthouse steps. "I'm sorry about that," Jesse said. "She means well, but..." She doesn't mean well at all. Catherine interrupted. She's trying to control you through shame and social pressure. I've seen it before. Women like her believe they know what's best for everyone, and they can't stand when people make choices outside their approval. You're not wrong. Catherine looked down at Ella, who was still standing protectively in front of her. Thank you, sweetheart. That was very brave. Ella smiled and took Catherine's hand, tugging her toward the courthouse door. I think your daughter's telling us to stop wasting time, Catherine said, and there was laughter in her voice now. Judge Morrison was a kindly man in his 60s who'd presided over every wedding in Silver Creek for the past 20 years. His wife Martha fussed over Ella while the judge reviewed the paperwork. Everything seems to be in order, Judge Morrison said. Miss Brennan, you're certain you want to proceed. No one's forcing you into this arrangement. I'm certain, Your Honor. This is my choice freely made. And Mr. Harding, you understand the responsibilities you're undertaking. Marriage is a sacred bond, not to be entered into lightly. I understand, sir. Very well then. Let's begin. The ceremony was simple and quick. Jesse repeated the vows the judge provided, his voice steady. Catherine's voice trembled slightly, but didn't waver. When Judge Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Jesse felt the weight of it settle over him, the finality, the commitment. You may kiss your bride, the judge said. Jesse looked at Catherine, saw the uncertainty in her eyes, and made a decision. He leaned in and kissed her forehead gently, respectfully. Not a passionate kiss, but a promise. I'll protect you. I'll honor you. I'll give you space to become whatever you need to be. Catherine's eyes closed briefly, and when she opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. Thank you, she whispered. Ella tugged on Jesse's sleeve. She was holding up a drawing she must have made while they were saying vows, the three of them standing together under a big heart. At the bottom, she'd written in careful letters, Family. Martha Morrison made a soft sound. Oh, that precious child. They signed the papers, received their marriage certificate, and walked out of the courthouse as husband and wife. The sun was bright on the snow, almost blinding. Well, Catherine said, that's done. That's done, Jesse agreed. They were loading the wagon when Reverend Cole appeared, slightly out of breath from running. Jesse, Catherine, wait. I heard you were here. He smiled warmly. Congratulations on your marriage. I'm sorry I couldn't perform the ceremony, but I'd be honored if you'd let me offer a blessing. That's kind of you, Reverend, Jesse said. Reverend Cole placed one hand on Jesse's shoulder and one on Catherine's. Lord, bless this union formed in practicality, but filled with potential. Bless this man who has known loss and is brave enough to try again. Bless this woman who crossed a continent seeking freedom and found purpose. And bless this child who binds them together with her innocent faith. May this family find strength in each other and grace in their journey. Amen. Amen, Catherine whispered. As they drove out of town, Jesse noticed people watching from windows and doorways. Some faces were disapproving, but others, Tom Bradley from the general store. The blacksmith, a few of the ranchers nodded respectfully or raised their hands in greeting. Not everyone thinks we're crazy, Jesse observed. Just the loudest ones. Catherine adjusted her bonnet. But their opinions will change when they see the results. Judge people by their actions, my father always said, and eventually the truth becomes undeniable. They were halfway home when Ella suddenly sat up straight and pointed. In the distance, smoke was rising from the direction of the Whitman ranch. That's too much smoke for a chimney fire, Jesse said, snapping the reins. Something's wrong. They arrived to find Clara Whitman's barn engulfed in flames. Her husband and their 2 ranch hands were trying to get the animals out, but the smoke was too thick, the fire too hot. My milk cow's still in there. Clara was sobbing. And the calf. They're trapped in the back stall. Jesse jumped down from the wagon. Where exactly? Northwest corner, but you can't go in there. The roof's about to collapse. Catherine was already moving, grabbing her medical bag from the wagon. Jesse, if you get them out, I can treat smoke inhalation. But you have to move fast." Jesse didn't think, just acted. He soaked his coat in the water trough, wrapped it around his head, and ran into the burning barn. The heat was incredible, the smoke choking. He could hear the cow bellowing in terror. The northwest stall. He found it by memory more than sight, his eyes streaming tears from the smoke. The cow was frantic, the calf pressed against her side. Jesse grabbed a rope, looped it around the cow's neck, and pulled. She didn't want to move. Terrified animals never do. But Jesse had worked with cattle his whole life, and he knew how to be more stubborn than they were. "Come on, Mama," he said through gritted teeth. "Your baby needs you to be brave." Maybe she understood something in his voice, or maybe sheer terror finally overcame paralysis. The cow stumbled forward, the calf following. Jesse led them through the smoke, through the terrible heat, following the diminishing light toward the door. They burst out into the cold air just as part of the roof collapsed behind them. Jesse's lungs were burning, his eyes streaming, but they were alive. Catherine was there immediately, examining the cow and calf with rapid efficiency. "Smoke inhalation, but they're breathing. Get them away from the barn into clean air. Someone bring blankets." The next hour was chaos. The barn burned to the ground despite everyone's best efforts, but all the animals survived. Catherine treated each one for smoke exposure, her hands steady, her voice calm. She showed Clara Whitman how to monitor the cow's breathing, how to recognize if pneumonia started developing, what symptoms to watch for. When it was finally over, when the fire had burned itself out and the animals were stable, Clara Whitman approached Catherine with tears streaming down her face. "You saved her," Clara said. "My Bessie. She's been with us for 10 years. I couldn't bear to lose her." "The smoke inhalation was moderate," Catherine said gently. "She'll need watching for the next few days, but she should recover fully." Clara looked at Catherine for a long moment. Then she did something Jesse never expected. She took Catherine's hands in her own. "I was wrong about you," Clara said quietly. "Wrong and cruel, and I'm sorry. You're exactly what Jesse Harding needs, what this community needs." Catherine's voice was kind. "You were protecting someone you care about. There's no shame in that. There's shame in being blind and stubborn when the truth is right in front of you." Clara squeezed Catherine's hands. "Welcome to Silver Creek, Mrs. Harding. Truly." On the ride home, as the sun set behind the mountains, Jesse glanced at his new wife. She was exhausted, covered in soot and smoke, her dress ruined. But there was satisfaction in her face, purpose. "Quite a wedding day," he said. Catherine laughed, and the sound was free and genuine. "Well, we'll certainly remember it." Ella was asleep between them, her head resting on Catherine's shoulder. Catherine had one arm around the child, holding her secure. "Thank you," Catherine said softly, "for going into that barn, for risking yourself to save Clara's animals even after how she treated us." "It's what you do," Jesse said simply. "When someone needs help, you help. Doesn't matter if they were kind to you or not. That's a good philosophy. Learned it from my wife." Jesse paused. "My first wife, I mean. Sarah always said kindness wasn't something you earned, it was something you gave freely. Took me a while to understand what she meant. I think I would have liked Sarah. I think she would have liked you too." Jesse meant it. Sarah had been practical and kind, strong and gentle. She would have recognized those same qualities in Catherine and approved. They pulled up to the ranch just as full dark settled. Mrs. Chen met them at the door, took one look at their soot-covered faces, and immediately started heating water for baths. "You two smell like burned barn," she announced. "Miss Ella already asleep." "Out cold," Catherine confirmed, carrying the child inside. "I'll get her cleaned up and into bed." Jesse watched Catherine carry his daughter upstairs, watched the gentle way she handled Ella's sleeping form, and felt that warmth in his chest expand. This was his family now. Imperfect, improvised, built from necessity and luck, but family nonetheless. Later, after they'd both bathed and changed, Jesse found Catherine in the kitchen drinking tea. Her hair was down, still damp, and she'd changed into a simple nightgown with a robe over it. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much excitement for one day." Catherine smiled. "We got married, saved a barn full of animals, and won over the town's biggest skeptic. That's a lot to process." Jesse poured himself tea and sat across from her. "Clara will spread the word. By tomorrow, everyone will know what you did, how you helped." "I didn't do it for reputation." "I know, but reputation matters in a small town. People will trust you now. Trust us." Catherine wrapped her hands around her teacup. "Jesse, I want to say something. About today, about all of this. I came here expecting a business arrangement. A marriage of convenience that would give me safety and you some help with the ranch. But what I've found," her voice caught, "you've given me more than safety. You've given me purpose again, respected my skills instead of trying to suppress them. And Ella, she's brought something back to life in me that I thought Thornton had killed." Jesse didn't know what to say to that, so he just reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "This is going to work," he said. "Our arrangement. Our marriage. It's going to work because we both need it to, and we're both willing to fight for it." Catherine's fingers curled around his. "I believe you." They sat there in the quiet kitchen, hands clasped, while outside the Montana wind sang through the pine trees and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. And somewhere in the barn, healthy horses slept peacefully, their breathing steady and strong. It wasn't a love story, not yet, but it was something real, something solid, something worth building on, and for both Jesse and Catherine, that was more than enough. The week after the wedding brought a cold snap that froze the water trough solid and turned the morning air sharp enough to cut. Catherine was in the barn before dawn, each day breaking ice and checking the horses with a diligence that never wavered. Jesse found himself watching her more than he meant to, noticing the capable way she moved, the gentleness in her hands, the quiet confidence that radiated from her like warmth from a fire. The strangles outbreak was contained. All 5 sick horses had recovered fully, their breathing clear, their appetites returned. The cavalry inspector was due in 2 weeks, and for the first time in months, Jesse felt confident they'd pass inspection. "Thunder's hoof looks completely healed," Catherine said one morning, running her hand down the gelding's leg. "No heat, no sensitivity. Whatever bruise he had is gone." "Thanks to your poultices," Jesse said. "Thanks to Ella noticing the problem before it got serious." Catherine straightened, brushing hay from her skirt. "She's got incredible instincts. Yesterday she pointed out that the bay mare in the west paddock was moving stiffly. I checked, and sure enough, mild arthritis in her hock joint. Nothing serious, but worth monitoring. She really does have a gift. She does. And she's reading her grandfather's journal every night. Mrs. Chen says Ella fell asleep with it open on her chest last night." Catherine's face softened. She wants to understand everything. How things work, why treatments help, what makes animals sick or healthy. She asks more questions without words than most people ask with them. Jesse felt that now familiar warmth in his chest. "You're good for her. She's more alive than she's been since Sarah died." "She's good for me, too." Catherine's voice dropped. "I never thought I'd have children. Thornton made it clear he wanted me as a servant, not a mother. Being part of Ella's life, teaching her, watching her grow, it's a gift I didn't expect." They were interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats coming fast up the road. Jesse stepped out of the barn to see a rider approaching, his horse lathered despite the cold. It was Tom Bradley's son, barely 16, his face red with cold and urgency. "Mr. Harding," the boy gasped. "My pa sent me. There's a man in town asking questions about Mrs. Harding. A man from Chicago." Catherine appeared in the barn doorway, her face going pale. "What kind of questions?" "About where you're staying, whether you're married, whether you've got any debts. Pa didn't like the way the man talked, said it felt threatening. Told me to ride out and warn you." Jesse's jaw clenched. "What's this man's name?" "Thornton. Tobias Thornton. He's staying at the boarding house, told folks he's here on business. Catherine's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her skirt, trying to still them. He found me. Go back to town, Jesse told the boy. Tell your father thank you, and tell him not to give Thornton any information. Nothing about this ranch, nothing about Catherine. The boy nodded and wheeled his horse around, disappearing back down the road in a spray of snow. Jesse turned to Catherine. How did he track you here? The matrimonial agency. He must have forced them to tell him where I'd gone. Catherine's voice was brittle. He's not going to let this go, Jesse. He thinks he owns me, thinks my father's debts give him rights to my life. He's wrong. Legal or not, he's got money and influence. He can make things very difficult. Jesse stepped closer, his voice steady and sure. Catherine, listen to me. You're my wife now. Legally bound to me, not him. Whatever debts your father owed died with him. Thornton's got no claim on you. You don't know him. He doesn't care about legalities. He cares about winning, about getting what he wants. Then he's about to learn what happens when he tries to take what belongs to this ranch. Jesse's voice was steel. Go inside. Stay with Ella and Mrs. Chen. I'm riding to town. Jesse, no. If you confront him directly, it'll just make things worse. I'm not confronting him. I'm making something very clear. Jesse went to saddle his horse, his movements sharp with controlled anger. Catherine followed him, her face tight with worry. What are you going to do? I'm going to remind Mr. Thornton that Montana territory operates under different rules than Chicago, and that threatening a man's wife is a good way to find yourself on the wrong end of frontier justice. Jesse, please, violence won't solve this. Jesse paused, one hand on his saddle. I'm not planning violence. I'm planning clarity. There's a difference. He rode into Silver Creek with his rifle across his saddle, not because he planned to use it, but because a man riding alone in winter carried protection. The town was quiet, most folks inside escaping the cold. He tied his horse outside the boarding house and walked in. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the place, looked up from her knitting. Jesse Harding. Bit cold for a social call. I'm looking for a guest. Man named Tobias Thornton. Room 3 upstairs. But Jesse, that man's got a mean look about him. You be careful. Jesse climbed the narrow stairs and knocked on room 3. The door opened to reveal a man in his 50s, well-dressed with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Mr. Harding, I presume, Thornton said smoothly. I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk. Please come in. Jesse stayed in the doorway. We can talk right here. Won't take long. Very well. Thornton's smile turned calculating. I'm here regarding Catherine Brennan. I understand she's residing at your ranch. Catherine Harding, Jesse corrected. My wife. We were married 6 days ago. Thornton's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. How convenient. A hasty marriage to avoid her obligations. She has no obligations to you. Her father owed me $300. Medical bills, equipment, cost, supplies purchased on credit. When he died, that debt passed to his daughter. That's not how debt works in Montana. A child doesn't inherit a parent's financial obligations. Perhaps not legally, but morally, Catherine benefited from the supplies her father bought from the medical care I provided on credit. She owes me compensation. Jesse leaned against the doorframe, his voice conversational but hard. Let me tell you how this looks to me, Thornton. A young woman's father dies, leaving her vulnerable. A man with money and power sees an opportunity to acquire something he wants. A wife, a servant, doesn't much matter which. He uses debt as leverage, tries to force her into marriage. When she refuses and runs, he follows her 1,800 miles to continue his harassment. Does that about sum it up? Thornton's face flushed. I offered Catherine a respectable arrangement. Marriage security, a comfortable home. She threw it back in my face out of pride and foolishness. Or maybe she threw it back because she recognized a cage when she saw one. Jesse straightened. Here's what you need to understand. Catherine is my wife. She's under my protection now. Whatever you think she owes you, whatever claim you think you have, it ended the moment she said her vows. You've got no authority here, no leverage, and no welcome. I could take this to a lawyer, contest the marriage on grounds that it was contracted to avoid legitimate debts. You could try, but you're in Montana territory now, not Illinois. Our judges don't look kindly on men who chase women across the country to harass them. And our community— Jesse's voice went colder. We take care of our own. Catherine's proven herself here. Saved lives, helped neighbors, earned respect. You're just a stranger making threats. Thornton stepped closer, his voice dropping. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Harding. I have connections, resources. I can make your life very difficult. And you have no idea what frontier justice looks like when a community decides someone's a threat. Jesse met Thornton's eyes steadily. I'm not threatening you. I'm just being clear. Catherine stays here. You leave. Today. And if you ever come back, if you ever try to contact her again, you'll find out exactly how inhospitable Montana can be to unwanted visitors. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Jesse turned and walked down the stairs, his heart pounding but his stride steady. He heard Thornton's door slam behind him. Mrs. Patterson looked up as he reached the ground floor. Everything all right, Jesse? Just fine, ma'am. Mr. Thornton will be checking out today. I'd appreciate it if you'd spread the word that he's not welcome back in Silver Creek. Mrs. Patterson's eyes gleamed with understanding. Consider it done. Jesse rode home expecting to feel triumphant, but instead he felt unsettled. Thornton wasn't the type to give up easily. Men like that never were. They'd lost one battle, but the war might not be over. Catherine was waiting on the porch when he returned, wrapped in her shawl, her face tight with anxiety. What happened? I made our position clear, told him to leave town and not come back. And did he agree? He didn't have much choice. Jesse dismounted and tied his horse. I wasn't subtle about the community standing with us. Catherine's hands twisted in her shawl. He won't just leave, Jesse. He's too proud, too used to getting his way. Then he'll learn a hard lesson about frontier life. They went inside where Mrs. Chen had hot coffee waiting. Ella was at the kitchen table drawing in her slate, but she looked up when they entered, her eyes worried. Everything's fine, sweetheart, Catherine said, sitting beside the child. Just some old business from Chicago that your papa's handling. Ella pointed at Catherine, then made a gesture like pushing something away. Yes, pushing bad things away. Your papa's very good at that. Jesse drank his coffee and watched his wife and daughter together, the easy communication between them, the trust. Thornton had no idea what he was up against. He thought he was dealing with a vulnerable woman and a desperate rancher. He didn't understand that he was threatening a family. The next morning brought fresh snow and a visitor. Reverend Cole rode up just after breakfast, his face grave. Jesse, Catherine, I need to speak with you both. They invited him into the parlor, and the Reverend sat heavily in the chair by the fire. Tobias Thornton came to see me yesterday afternoon, Reverend Cole said. He asked me to investigate your marriage, claimed it was fraudulent, contracted under false pretenses to help Catherine avoid legitimate debts. Catherine's face went white. What did you tell him? I told him I'd witnessed your marriage certificate being signed, that Judge Morrison performed the ceremony lawfully, and that I'd personally offered you a blessing as husband and wife. I also told him that I'd spoken with several townspeople who've witnessed Catherine's veterinary skills firsthand, and that her reputation here is beyond reproach. Thank you, Jesse said quietly. I'm not finished. Reverend Cole's expression was troubled. Thornton then asked me about annulment procedures, what grounds might exist to dissolve a marriage in Montana territory. I refused to provide that information, but Jesse, the man's not giving up. He's looking for any legal angle to separate you two. Catherine stood abruptly and walked to the window, her shoulders rigid. This is my fault. I brought this to your door, Jesse. Maybe I should just go back to Chicago, settle things with Thornton, end this. Absolutely not. Jesse's voice was sharp enough to make her turn. You're not going anywhere. But if he keeps pushing, if he finds a legal way to contest the marriage, then we'll fight it, together. Jesse stood and crossed to her. Catherine, You're my wife. That's not negotiable, not temporary, not something I'm willing to give up because some bully from Chicago thinks he can intimidate us." Reverend Cole cleared his throat. "There may be another approach. I know a lawyer in Bozeman, good man, honest. If you'd like, I can send for him, have him review Catherine's situation, determine if Thornton has any legitimate legal standing." "Do it," Jesse said immediately. "Whatever it costs, I'll pay." "Actually," Reverend Cole said slowly, "the community might be willing to help with costs." After Catherine saved Clara Whitman's livestock, word spread fast. People are grateful. They want to help protect one of their own. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. One of their own. "You saved lives, Mrs. Harding. Treated sick animals without asking for payment. Showed up Clara Whitman with grace when you could have been petty. People notice things like that. They remember." Reverend Cole stood. "I'll ride to Bozeman tomorrow. The lawyer should be here by week's end." After the Reverend left, Catherine sat at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. "I never wanted this. Never wanted to be a burden to bring trouble." Jesse sat beside her. "You're not a burden. You're my wife. And dealing with trouble together is what marriage is." "Is it?" Catherine looked up, her face vulnerable. "Your first marriage, was it like this, constant crisis and complications?" "Sarah and I had our share of troubles. Drought years, failed crop sickness. Marriage isn't about avoiding problems, Catherine. It's about facing them together instead of alone." "I don't know how to do that. Be part of a team. I've been on my own since my father died." "So have I since Sarah. We're both learning." Jesse reached across the table and took her hand. "But we're learning together. That counts for something." Ella appeared in the doorway holding her slate. She'd drawn a picture of 3 people holding hands in a circle. Above them, she'd drawn storm clouds on one side and sunshine on the other. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Catherine said, her voice thick. "Is that us going through the storm to the sunshine?" Ella nodded solemnly and brought the slate over, placing it in Catherine's lap. Then she did something she'd never done before. She climbed into Catherine's lap, wrapped her arms around her neck, and held on tight. Catherine's tears spilled over. She held Ella close, burying her face in the child's hair, and Jesse had to look away, his own throat too tight to speak. That afternoon, Jesse was working in the barn when Tom Bradley arrived with an urgent message. "Jesse thought you should know. Thornton's still in town. He went to the telegraph office this morning, sent multiple wires to Chicago, and he's been asking around about property laws, marriage statutes, debt collection procedures." Jesse's jaw clenched. "He's building a case." "Looks like it. Also heard he hired a couple of men, rough types, to watch your ranch. They've been seen on the ridge above your north pasture." That changed everything. Watching the ranch meant Thornton wasn't just gathering legal ammunition. He was gathering intelligence, looking for leverage, possibly planning something more direct. "Tom, I need a favor. Can you send word to the neighboring ranches? Let them know what's happening. Ask them to keep an eye out for strangers on their property." "Already done. Most folks around here don't appreciate outsiders making trouble. You'll have support if things get ugly." After Tom left, Jesse found Catherine in the small veterinary barn she'd set up in the old storage shed. She was organizing her supplies, making detailed notes in her father's journal. "We have a problem," Jesse said, and explained about the hired watchers. Catherine's hand stilled on the journal. "He's looking for something to use against us. Some violation, some weakness. Or he's planning to force a confrontation, make you feel unsafe enough to leave." "I won't leave." "I know. But we need to be smart about this." Jesse leaned against the workbench. "No going anywhere alone. Not to town, not to check the far pastures, nowhere. And Ella stays close to the house." "You think he'd try to take Ella, use her as leverage?" "I think desperate men do desperate things, and Thornton strikes me as a man who's used to winning and doesn't handle losing well." That night Jesse checked every window lock and door bolt twice. He loaded his rifle and kept it by the bed. Mrs. Chen moved into the room next to Ella's, and Catherine slept with a knife under her pillow that her father had given her years ago. "This is absurd," Catherine whispered in the darkness. They were both in their separate rooms, but Jessie could hear her moving around, restless and anxious. "We're living like we're under siege." "We are under siege," Jessie called back. "But sieges end. Thornton can't stay here forever. He's got a business in Chicago, responsibilities. Eventually, he'll have to leave. Or eventually he'll find what he's looking for." 3 days later, the lawyer arrived from Bozeman. His name was Marcus Webb, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s who listened carefully as Catherine explained her situation. "First thing you need to understand," Webb said, "is that your father's debts died with him. Montana Territory doesn't recognize inherited debt unless the heir specifically agrees to assume it. Did you ever sign anything accepting responsibility for your father's obligations?" "No. Thornton presented papers, but I refused to sign." "Good. That means legally you owe him nothing." Webb made notes. "However, he could potentially argue that you received benefits from supplies purchased on credit and therefore have a moral obligation to compensate him. But that's a civil matter, not a criminal one, and the courts here are unlikely to be sympathetic given the circumstances." "What about the marriage?" Jessie asked. "Can he contest it?" "On what grounds?" "You were both of legal age, both willing participants. The ceremony was lawful and properly witnessed. The only way to contest would be to prove fraud or coercion. And from what you've told me, the opposite is true. Catherine came here willingly. You married her willingly. The marriage is solid." Catherine's shoulders relaxed slightly. "So he has no legal standing?" "Not in Montana. Now, if he tried to take this to Illinois courts, argue that you fled the state to avoid legitimate debts, he might find a more sympathetic judge. But enforcing an Illinois judgment here would be difficult and expensive. Most likely he's hoping to intimidate you into returning voluntarily." "That's not happening," Catherine said firmly. "Then my advice is to document everything. Every interaction with Thornton, every witness to his harassment, every threat or intimidation tactic. Build a record. If he escalates, you'll need it." Webb stayed for dinner, and over Mrs. Chen's excellent pot roast, he told them about similar cases he'd handled. "The frontier attracts people running from something," he said. "Failed businesses, bad marriages, debts they can't pay. Most of them are just looking for a fresh start. The law here generally supports that as long as they're willing to work hard and contribute to their community." "Catherine's done both," Jessie said. "I can see that. The Reverend spoke highly of her skills and her character, and I stopped by the Whitman Ranch on my way here. Mrs. Whitman had quite a lot to say about Mrs. Harding's veterinary abilities." Catherine looked surprised. "Clara talked to you?" "At length. Said you were the best thing to happen to Silver Creek in years, and that if Thornton caused you any trouble, he'd have the entire town to answer to." Webb smiled. "You've made quite an impression in a short time, Mrs. Harding." After Webb left to return to Bozeman, promising to stay available if needed, Jessie and Catherine sat on the porch despite the cold. The stars were brilliant overhead, the air crisp and still. "I think we might actually win this," Catherine said quietly. "We will win. Thornton's fighting on our ground now by our rules. He doesn't stand a chance. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to find some angle we haven't considered." Jessie turned to look at her. "You've spent so long running and hiding that you can't quite believe you get to stand and fight. But you do, Catherine. You've got legal standing, community support, and a husband who's not backing down. Thornton's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet." Catherine leaned her head on Jessie's shoulder, a gesture that was becoming familiar, comfortable. "Thank you. For fighting for me. For believing I was worth fighting for." "You're my wife. Of course you're worth fighting for." They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead, and Jessie thought about how much had changed in 2 weeks. He'd gone from desperate and alone to married and supported. His daughter was speaking again, not with words yet, but with smiles and hugs and drawings that said everything words couldn't. His horses were healthy. His ranch was stable. And the woman beside him, who'd arrived as a stranger and a convenience, was becoming something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously close to essential. The next morning brought the answer to what Thornton's next move would be. Jesse was in the barn when he heard shouting from the house. He ran back to find Catherine on the porch, her face white with fury, holding a legal document. "What is it?" Thornton filed a complaint with the territorial marshal. "Claims I stole medical equipment and supplies from his pharmacy before I left Chicago. Says I'm a thief and should be arrested and returned to Illinois to face charges." Jesse took the document and read it, his anger building with every word. It was complete fabrication. Catherine had taken nothing but her own belongings and her father's journal. But it was clever. If the marshal believed the complaint, he'd have to investigate. And during an investigation, Catherine could be held, possibly even extradited. This is what he was building toward, Catherine said, her voice shaking. He can't win through debt claims or marriage contests, so he's inventing criminal charges. And if a marshal arrests me if I get sent back to Chicago, that's not happening. Jesse, you can't stop a legal arrest. Watch me. Jesse strode into the house and grabbed his coat. I'm riding to find the marshal before Thornton does. Going to make sure he hears the truth before he hears Thornton's lies. I'm coming with you. No. You stay here with Ella, stay safe. I'll handle this. For the first time since he'd known her, Catherine's temper flared. Stop trying to protect me from my own fight, Jesse. This is my life, my reputation, my freedom. I'm not hiding while you handle it. They stared at each other, wills clashing, until Jesse finally nodded. All right, we go together. But we bring witnesses. Tom Bradley, Clara Whitman, anyone who can vouch for your character. Within 2 hours, they'd assembled a group. Tom and his wife Clara, and her husband, Reverend Cole, and 3 other ranchers who'd benefited from Catherine's veterinary skills. They rode into Silver Creek together, a united front. The territorial marshal had just arrived and was reading Thornton's complaint in the sheriff's office. He was a weathered man named Dixon, known for his fairness and his no-nonsense approach to frontier justice. Marshal Dixon, Jesse said, before you make any decisions based on that complaint, I need you to hear from some witnesses. Dixon looked up, his eyes sharp. You're Harding, and this must be the Mrs. Harding in question. Yes, sir. And who are all these folks? One by one they told their stories. Tom spoke about Catherine's medical knowledge and the supplies she'd used to save Clara's livestock. Clara herself testified to Catherine's character and skills. Reverend Cole presented documentation of the marriage and his personal observations. The other ranchers described animals Catherine had treated, lives she'd saved. When they finished, Dixon set down Thornton's complaint. Mr. Thornton, you want to tell me why a woman with this kind of reputation and community support would need to steal medical supplies from your pharmacy? Thornton, who'd been waiting smugly in the corner, straightened. She had no money, Marshal. Her father died in debt to me. How else could she afford the equipment I saw her using? That equipment belonged to my father, Catherine said clearly. Every piece of it. I have receipts, bills of sale, everything documented in his records. I can prove ownership of every item in my medical bag. Then I suggest you produce those documents, Dixon said. Catherine pulled her father's journal from her bag and opened it to the back pages where James Brennan had meticulously recorded every purchase, every piece of equipment with dates and prices. Dixon reviewed them carefully, comparing them to the list of allegedly stolen items in Thornton's complaint. These don't match, Dixon said finally. The items Dr. Brennan purchased don't correspond to the items Mr. Thornton claims were stolen. In fact, several items on Thornton's list weren't even available in 1879 when Dr. Brennan made his purchases. Thornton's face flushed. She could have doctored those records. In her dead father's handwriting, with ink that's clearly years old. Dixon closed the journal and handed it back to Catherine. Mr. Thornton filing a false complaint with a territorial marshal is a serious offense. You want to rethink your statement. There must be some mistake. I was certain she took those items. Or you were certain you could use false charges to harass a woman who refused to marry you. Dixon's voice went cold. I don't take kindly to my office being used for personal vendettas. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw this complaint in writing. You're going to leave Silver Creek today and not return. And if I hear one more word about you harassing Mrs. Harding, I'll file charges against you for making false statements to a peace officer. Are we clear? Thornton looked at Catherine with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yeah, it is, Dixon said. And if you're too stubborn to see that you'll find yourself in a Montana jail cell contemplating your choices, your call. Thornton left without another word, his shoulders rigid with fury. But he left. That was what mattered. Outside the sheriff's office, Catherine sagged against Jesse, all the tension draining out of her at once. It's really over. He's really leaving. He's leaving, Jesse confirmed. And if he's smart, he won't come back. Clara Whitman approached, her face warm. Catherine, dear, you held up beautifully in there. Didn't let him intimidate you one bit. I had help, Catherine said, looking at the group assembled around her. All of you. Thank you. We take care of our own, Tom Bradley said simply. You're one of us now. They rode home as the sun set, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. Ella was waiting on the porch, and when she saw them, she ran down the steps and threw herself into Catherine's arms. It's all right, sweetheart, Catherine whispered, holding her tight. Everything's all right now. The bad man is gone. Ella pulled back and looked at Catherine's face, searching for truth. Then she smiled that brilliant smile that lit up her whole face, and for the first time in 2 years she spoke. Mama Kate. Ella whispered the words, soft but clear as bells. You stayed. Catherine's tears fell freely. I stayed, baby. I'll always stay. Jesse had to turn away, overwhelmed by the moment. His daughter had found her voice again. His wife had won her freedom. His family was whole and safe. That night, after Ella was asleep and Mrs. Chen had retired to her room, Jesse found Catherine in the kitchen, still holding Ella's slate, where the child had written, Mama Kate stayed, over and over in careful letters. She called me Mama, Catherine said, wonder in her voice. She loves you. We both do. The words were out before Jesse could stop them. Catherine looked up, her eyes wide. Jesse, I know this wasn't supposed to be that kind of marriage. I know we agreed to partnership, not romance. But somewhere between you saving my horses and fighting Thornton and winning over my daughter, I fell in love with you, Catherine, and I needed you to know that. Catherine stood, crossing to where he stood in the doorway. I thought I was done with love, thought Thornton had killed that part of me. But you brought it back. You and Ella both. Jesse reached for her, and this time when they kissed, it wasn't respectful or tentative. It was real and deep, and full of promise. So, what do we do now? Catherine whispered against his lips. Now. Jesse smiled. Now we stop pretending this is just a business arrangement and start building a real marriage, if you're willing. I'm willing, Catherine said. More than willing. They stood in the kitchen holding each other while the fire crackled, and outside the Montana wind sang through the pines. Thornton was gone. The horses were healthy. Ella was speaking again, and two people who'd married for practical reasons had found something infinitely more valuable. They'd found each other. Spring came slowly to Montana that year, the snow melting in patches to reveal brown earth that would soon turn green. Jesse woke each morning to find Catherine already in the barn, her sleeves rolled up, talking softly to the horses as she checked them over with the same thoroughness she'd shown that first night. But now there was lightness in her movements, joy in her voice. The fear that had shadowed her eyes for weeks was gone. Ella followed Catherine everywhere, a small shadow with bright eyes and endless questions. She spoke in whispers, still her voice recovering slowly, like a muscle that had been too long unused, but she spoke. Every day brought new words, new sentences, new laughter that filled the house with music Jesse had thought he'd never hear again. "Mama Kate, why does Thunder toss his head when you check his teeth?" Ella asked one morning, her hand gentle on the gelding's neck. "Because he's ticklish, sweetheart. See how his lips twitch? That's him trying not to laugh." Catherine demonstrated, and sure enough, Thunder's ears flicked forward in what looked remarkably like amusement. Animals have personalities just like people. Thunder's proud and a little vain. He doesn't like anyone fussing with his mouth. But you can do it. He lets you. Because we have an understanding. I respect his dignity, and he trusts me not to hurt him. Catherine finished the examination and gave Thunder a piece of apple. That's the foundation of all good relationships, Ella. Mutual respect and trust. Jesse listened from the barn door, struck by how naturally Catherine had stepped into the role of mother. Not trying to replace Sarah, but creating something new and equally precious. Ella had needed someone who understood her silence, who could teach her without demanding she be different than she was. Catherine had given her that gift. The cavalry inspector arrived 3 weeks after Thornton left a stern-faced captain named Reynolds, who examined each horse with meticulous care. Jesse watched him work his stomach tight with anxiety despite Catherine's assurances that the herd was in excellent condition. Reynolds ran his hands down Thunder's legs, checked teeth and hooves, examined eyes and coats. He made notes in a small leather book, his expression revealing nothing. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, he straightened and faced Jesse. "Mr. Harding, I've been inspecting horses for the cavalry for 12 years. I've never seen a healthier herd. Whatever you've been doing, keep doing it." Jesse's breath left him in a rush. "So we pass?" "You more than pass. In fact, I'd like to increase your contract. The cavalry needs quality horses, and you're clearly capable of providing them." Reynolds glanced toward the barn where Catherine was working with a young mare. "That your wife I've been hearing about? The one with veterinary training?" "That's her. I'd like to speak with her if you don't mind. The cavalry's been looking for someone who can train our soldiers in basic horse care. Might be interested in having her consult." Catherine emerged from the barn, wiping her hands on a cloth, and Jesse made introductions. Reynolds explained what he was looking for, and Jesse saw Catherine's eyes light up with interest. "I could develop a training program," Catherine said slowly. "Basic health assessment, common ailments preventive care. Soldiers should know how to recognize problems before they become emergencies." "Exactly." Reynolds nodded. "Would you be willing to come to Fort Bozeman once a month? We'd compensate you, of course." Catherine looked at Jesse seeking permission, or maybe just confirmation that this was real, that she was truly free to build her own career. He nodded, pride swelling in his chest. "I'd be honored, Captain Reynolds." After Reynolds left with a signed contract for 40 horses and a consulting agreement for Catherine, Jesse swept his wife into his arms and spun her around. She laughed, breathless and radiant. "We did it," she said. "The ranch is saved." "You did it. You saved this place before I even knew it needed saving." Jesse set her down but kept his arms around her. "I'm proud of you, Catherine. So damn proud." She buried her face in his chest. "I never thought I'd have this. A home, a family, work I love that's respected and valued. It feels like a dream. It's real, all of it." That night they celebrated with a dinner that Mrs. Chen had been planning for days. The table was laden with roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from the root cellar, and a pie made from preserved apples. Ella sat between her parents, chattering about the horses, about the training program Catherine would develop, about everything and nothing, with the enthusiasm of a child who'd been silent too long. "Can I help with the training program, Mama Kate?" Ella asked, her voice still soft but growing stronger each day. "I could draw pictures of the horses, show the different parts we need to check." "That's a wonderful idea," Catherine said. "Your drawings are very detailed. They'd be perfect for teaching." Ella beamed and immediately started sketching on her slate, her small tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Later, after Ella was asleep and Mrs. Chen had retired, Jesse and Catherine sat together on the porch. The night air was cool, but no longer bitter, carrying the promise of spring. "I got a letter from Marcus Webb today," Catherine said quietly. "He wanted to update us on Thornton." Jesse tensed. "What about him?" "He's back in Chicago. Webb has a contact there who's been watching the situation. Apparently Thornton's been quiet, hasn't made any more attempts to contact me or cause trouble." "Good." Webb thinks he finally accepted defeat. The false complaint damaged his reputation in Chicago. People are asking questions about why he chased a woman to Montana, why he tried to use the law to harass her. It's not the kind of attention a respectable businessman wants. Jesse pulled Catherine closer. "So it's really over." "It's really over." Catherine turned to look at him, her face serious. "Jesse, I need to tell you something. About us, about this marriage." His heart skipped. "All right. When I came here, I thought I just needed safety. A place Thornton couldn't reach, a new start where no one knew me. But what I found," her voice caught, "you gave me so much more than safety. You gave me purpose, respect, love. You let me be exactly who I am, all the messy, unconventional parts, and you never once asked me to be smaller or quieter or more acceptable." "Catherine, let me finish. I need to say this." She took his hand, her fingers threading through his. "I love you, not because you saved me from Thornton, not because you gave me a home, but because you see me, the real me, and you think she's worth loving." Jesse brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "That's because she is. You're the strongest, bravest, most capable woman I've ever known. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." They kissed under the emerging stars, and this time, there was no hesitation, no holding back. This was a marriage built on choice, on mutual respect, on love, earned through shared struggle and triumph. When they finally pulled apart, Catherine was smiling. "I should warn you, Captain Reynolds isn't the only one who's been asking about my services. Clara Whitman told half the territory about what I did for her animals. I've had 3 ranchers contact me this week alone, asking if I'd consult on their herds." "You're building a practice." "I am. Is that all right? I know it means I'll be traveling sometimes, working long hours." Jesse laughed. "Catherine, I married a veterinarian. I'd be a fool to expect you not to practice. Besides, we're partners. We'll figure out how to make it work." "Partners," Catherine repeated, savoring the word. "I like that." The next few weeks brought a flurry of activity. Catherine divided her time between the ranch developing the cavalry training program and consulting visits to neighboring ranches. Jesse watched her confidence grow with each successful treatment, each grateful rancher, each horse that recovered under her care. Ella accompanied her mother on local calls, learning by observation and careful questioning. The child had a gift for gentling nervous animals, for reading their body language and anticipating their needs. Catherine nurtured that gift, teaching Ella everything from her grandfather's journal and her own experience. One afternoon, they returned from treating a sick mare at the Peterson Ranch to find Clara Whitman waiting on their porch with several other women from town. "Catherine, dear, we need to talk to you about something," Clara said, her face serious. Catherine exchanged glances with Jesse, worry flickering in her eyes. "Of course. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Quite the opposite." Clara gestured to the other women. "We've been talking, all of us, about what you've done for this community. The animals you've saved, the knowledge you've shared. And we realized something. Silver Creek doesn't have a veterinarian. Never has. People have to ride all the way to Bozeman when their animals get sick, and by then it's often too late. I know. It's a common problem in frontier towns. We want to change that. We want you to open a proper veterinary practice here in Silver Creek." Clara pulled out a folded paper. "We've pooled our resources, talked to our husbands, gotten commitments from most of the ranchers in the valley. We have enough money to build you a clinic, stock it with supplies, whatever you need." Catherine stared at the paper, then at the women, her mouth opening and closing without sound. You're saying you want me to be the town veterinarian. We're saying you already are, dear. We just want to make it official. Give you a proper place to work, compensation for your time, recognition for your skills. Clara's voice softened. You saved my Bessie when I thought she was lost. You've saved dozens of animals since then. You belong here, Catherine. Let us give you the tools to do what you do best. Jesse watched his wife's face transform, watched years of rejection and dismissal, and being told she wasn't good enough fall away in the light of this acceptance. She was crying, but she was also smiling, radiant with joy. I don't know what to say, Catherine whispered. Say yes, one of the other women urged. Say you'll let us do this for you, for the community. Catherine looked at Jesse, seeking his opinion. He nodded, his own throat too tight to speak. Yes, Catherine said. Yes, thank you. I'd be honored. The women erupted in excited chatter, discussing locations for the clinic, what equipment would be needed, how to organize the funding. Jesse pulled Catherine aside while they planned. This is what you always wanted, isn't it? He said quietly. Recognition for your skills, the ability to practice openly. I wanted it. I just never believed I'd get it. Catherine wiped her eyes. In Chicago, I had to hide what I knew, practice in secret, pretend to be less capable than I was. Here people celebrate my knowledge. They want me to use it. It's everything I never dared to hope for. You deserve it. Every bit of it. Construction on the clinic began 2 weeks later. It was a community effort with ranchers donating lumber and labor, townspeople contributing supplies and furniture. The building went up quickly, a sturdy structure on the edge of town, with separate areas for examining animals, storing medicines, and keeping detailed records. Catherine threw herself into organizing the space, ordering supplies from Bozeman, and even from contacts her father had maintained in Chicago. She created a lending library of veterinary texts that anyone could borrow, started a monthly meeting where ranchers could discuss animal health issues and share knowledge, and began training 2 young men from town in basic veterinary care. Jesse watched his wife bloom, becoming more confident and assured with each passing day. The woman who'd arrived, scared and running, was gone, replaced by someone strong and certain of her place in the world. But success brought new challenges. A rancher named Garrett, from 30 miles north, arrived one day with a sick bull, demanding that Catherine treat the animal immediately. When she explained that she had other appointments scheduled and couldn't see him until the following day, Garrett's face turned ugly. I rode 30 miles to get here. You'll see my bull now, or you're no kind of veterinarian. Catherine's voice stayed calm. Mr. Garrett, I understand you've traveled far, but I have commitments to other ranchers who scheduled their appointments in advance. I can see your bull first thing tomorrow morning, or if it's truly an emergency, I can examine him after my current patients. But I won't push aside people who respected my schedule. This is what happens when you let women play at men's work, Garrett spat. Too emotional to handle the pressure, too weak to manage a real practice. Jesse, who'd been working nearby, stepped forward. Mr. Garrett, I suggest you adjust your tone when speaking to my wife. Or what? You'll defend her honor, Garrett sneered. Everyone knows she's only got this practice because the townfolk feel sorry for her. She's no real doctor. Catherine placed a hand on Jesse's arm before he could respond. Mr. Garrett, I'm going to give you 2 choices. You can apologize for your rudeness, and I'll examine your bull right now ahead of my other appointments, because despite your behavior, I care about animal welfare. Or you can continue being insulting and you can take your bull to Bozeman. Your choice. Garrett stared at her, clearly unused to being challenged. Finally, grudgingly, he muttered, Sorry for the harsh words. Bull's in bad shape. I'm worried. Then let's take a look. Catherine grabbed her medical bag and followed Garrett to his wagon. The bull was indeed sick, running a high fever with labored breathing. Catherine examined him thoroughly, then looked at Garrett with sympathy. It's pneumonia. Advanced stage. I can treat him, but I need to be honest with you. His chances aren't good. Maybe 30% survival. Garrett's bluster crumbled. He's my best breeder. worth more than everything else I own combined. If he dies, I'll do everything I can, but you need to prepare yourself." Catherine was already mixing medications, her hands steady despite the gravity of the situation. "I'll need to stay with him tonight, monitor his breathing, administer treatments every few hours." "You do that? After how I spoke to you?" "This isn't about you, Mr. Garrett. It's about your bull." Catherine glanced at Jesse. "I'll send word if anything changes." Jesse wanted to argue, wanted to tell her to come home, but he recognized the set of her jaw. This was who she was, someone who put animal welfare above personal comfort, above pride, above everything else. "I'll bring you dinner and a warm coat," was all he said. Catherine worked through the night with Garrett's bull, and Jesse brought Ella to visit after dark. The child sat quietly beside her mother, watching the labored rise and fall of the bull's chest. "Will he be all right, Mama Kate?" Ella whispered. "I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes even when we do everything right, animals still die. All we can do is try our best and hope. Like with Grandpa, Papa said you tried your best, but sometimes people die anyway." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, like with Grandpa, and like with your first mama. We can't control everything, Ella. We can only control our effort, our care, our love." Ella leaned against Catherine's shoulder. "I'm glad you're my second mama. First mama would be glad too." Jesse had to step outside, overcome by the simple wisdom of his daughter's words. Sarah would have been glad. She would have loved Catherine, would have respected her strength and her skill. And she would have been grateful that her daughter had someone who understood her, who nurtured her gifts, instead of trying to reshape her into something more conventional. The bull survived. Against the odds, with Catherine's tireless care and constant monitoring, he pulled through. Garrett cried when Catherine gave him the news 3 days later, his big, weathered hands shaking as he thanked her. "I'm sorry," he said again, "for what I said, how I acted. You're a real doctor, better than any I've met." "Just take care of him," Catherine said simply. "Follow the treatment plan I gave you, and he should make a full recovery." Word of the bull's survival spread quickly. If Catherine Harding could save an animal that far gone, she could save anything. Ranchers started coming from farther and farther away, bringing their most difficult cases, their animals that other veterinarians had given up on. Catherine's reputation grew, and with it came opportunities. A veterinary college in California wrote asking if she'd consider lecturing. A medical journal requested an article about her herbal remedies. The Army Veterinary Corps invited her to consult on a disease outbreak at Fort Shaw. "This is getting bigger than just Silver Creek," Jesse observed one evening as Catherine sorted through correspondence. "You could build a real career here, Catherine. Not just a local practice, but something significant." Catherine looked up from the letter she was reading. "Would you mind if I traveled more, took on bigger cases?" "Mind, I'm proud of you. You're doing exactly what you were meant to do." Jesse sat beside her. "We'll figure out the logistics. Maybe hire someone to help with the routine cases, free you up for the complex ones. Whatever it takes to let you reach your full potential." Catherine kissed him soft and grateful. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky. I found a wife who saved my ranch and won my daughter's heart. You found a husband who doesn't think your ambitions are threatening. That's rarer than you'd think. Then most men are fools." As spring turned to summer, the Harding Ranch became a hub of activity. Catherine's clinic drew a steady stream of clients. Her consulting work took her throughout the territory, and the cavalry training program was so successful that 2 other forts requested her services. Jesse expanded the horse breeding operation, using the profits from the cavalry contract to improve facilities and purchase better breeding stock. Ella thrived in the middle of it all, learning from both parents, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. She was already assisting Catherine with basic treatments, her gentle hands and intuitive understanding of animals making her invaluable. One evening as they sat together after dinner, Ella looked up from the drawing she was making. "Papa, Mama Kate, I've been thinking about something." "What's that, sweetheart?" Jessie asked. "When I grow up, I want to be a veterinarian like Grandpa Brennan and Mama Kate, a real one with a degree and everything. Will that be all right?" Catherine's eyes shone with tears. "Oh, Ella, that would be more than all right. That would be wonderful." "But I'm a girl. The colleges don't accept girls." "They don't now," Catherine said firmly. "But things are changing. By the time you're old enough, they might. And if they don't, we'll find another way. I'll teach you everything I know, and you'll be so skilled that no college will be able to deny you." "You really think so?" "I know so. You're already better at reading animal behavior than most trained veterinarians I've met. You have a gift, Ella. We're going to nurture it, and nobody's going to stop you from using it." Jesse watched his wife and daughter, their heads bent together over Ella's drawings, planning a future that would have seemed impossible just months ago. A future where a girl could dream of being a veterinarian and have people support that dream instead of crushing it. This was what Catherine had brought to their lives. Not just veterinary skills or financial stability, but possibility. The belief that they could be more than what others expected, that they could build lives based on their strengths rather than others' limitations. That night, lying beside Catherine in the darkness, Jessie said, "I think we should tell Ella the full story someday. About how you came here, what you were running from, how you fought to build this life." Why? Because she needs to know that the strong, confident woman she sees now wasn't always that way. That you were scared once, that you ran, that you doubted yourself, and that you overcame all of it. Jessie turned to face her. She needs to know that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and moving forward anyway. Catherine was quiet for a moment. "You're right. When she's older, when she can understand, we'll tell her. All of it. She'll be proud of you, just like I am. We'll tell her about Sarah, too. About her first mama who loved horses and believed in teaching children through gentleness. About how two mothers can both be real and both be loved." "Sarah would have liked that," Jessie said softly. "She always said love multiplies, it doesn't divide." They fell asleep holding each other secure in the life they'd built together. Outside, the summer wind whispered through the pines, carrying the sound of horses moving peacefully in their pastures. The ranch was thriving, the clinic was succeeding, and a family that had been broken was whole again. Not because everything was perfect, but because they'd learned that perfection wasn't the goal. Building something real, something lasting, something worth fighting for, that was what mattered. And they'd done it. Together. Winter returned to Montana Territory, as it always did, sudden and absolute, transforming the world into something crystalline and still. But this December was different from the one a year ago when Catherine had first arrived. The barn was warm and well-maintained, the horses healthy and strong, and the house rang with voices instead of silence. Jessie stood at the kitchen window watching snow fall in thick flakes, remembering that desperate night when he'd prayed for a sign for anything that might save him from drowning in his own despair. He'd asked God for help, and God had sent him a woman walking through a blizzard with a veterinary journal and more courage than sense. "What are you thinking about?" Catherine asked, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. "About miracles. About how sometimes they look like stubborn women who refuse to give up." She laughed against his shoulder. "Is that what I am? A miracle. Every single day." Jessie turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "A year ago, I was ready to lose everything. Now I have more than I ever dreamed of having again." "We both do." Catherine kissed him softly. "I was thinking we should do something special for Christmas. Mark the anniversary of when everything changed." "What did you have in mind?" "A celebration. Invite the whole community. Show them what their support made possible." Catherine's eyes sparkled with plans. "Clara's been hinting that the church needs a new roof. What if we donated the funds? Use some of our profits from this year to give back?" Jessie smiled. That was so perfectly. Catherine always thinking of others, always looking for ways to lift up her community. "I think that's a fine idea. Sarah would have approved." They spent the next week preparing. Mrs. Chen cooked for days, filling the house with the smells of roasting meat and baking bread. Ella helped Catherine decorate stringing pine garlands and making paper ornaments with the careful attention to detail she brought to everything. Jessie cleaned the barn and set up tables, transforming it into a gathering space warm enough for a winter celebration. On Christmas Eve morning, Catherine went to the clinic early to check on a horse recovering from colic. Jessie was supposed to meet her there after finishing morning chores, but when he arrived, he found her sitting at her desk, staring at an opened letter, her face pale. "What's wrong?" Catherine looked up, her eyes distant. "It's from the Chicago Veterinary Society. They want to offer me associate membership. Not full membership because I'm a woman, but associate status. It would give me access to their resources, their research, their network." "That's wonderful, isn't it?" "It is. It's everything my father wanted for me, everything he worked toward." Her voice was thick. "I just wish he could see it. Wish he could know that his teaching wasn't wasted, that I'm doing exactly what he trained me to do." Jessie knelt beside her chair. "He knows, Catherine. Wherever he is, he knows, and he's proud of you." "How can you be sure?" "Because I'm proud of you, and I've only known you a year. He knew you your whole life. Watched you grow, taught you everything he knew, trusted you with his life's work." Jessie took her hands. "Of course he's proud. How could he not be?" Catherine wiped her eyes. "I'm going to accept, not for the prestige, but because it means I can help more animals learn new techniques, contribute to the field my father loved. Then accept with my blessing and my pride." That evening, as twilight fell and the snow continued its gentle descent, people began arriving at the ranch. Clara and her husband came first, bringing fresh apple cider. Tom Bradley and his family followed, then Reverend Cole, then ranchers from throughout the valley. Even Marshall Dixon rode in from his rounds to join the celebration. The barn filled with warmth and laughter, with the sound of fiddles and conversation and children playing. Jessie stood at the edge of it all, watching his wife move through the crowd, stopping to talk with everyone, her face alight with joy and belonging. Ella tugged at his sleeve. "Papa, are you going to make a speech?" "I suppose I should. You want to help me?" Ella nodded seriously. At 9 years old, she was still small for her age, but her voice had grown strong and clear. She climbed onto a hay bale beside her father, and Jessie called for attention. "Folks, thank you all for coming tonight. Catherine and I wanted to gather you here to say thank you for everything you've done for us this year, for welcoming a stranger into your community, for supporting her when she needed it most, for giving her the chance to prove herself." "She didn't need much proving," someone called out, and laughter rippled through the crowd. "Maybe not," Jessie agreed. "But you gave her that chance anyway, and it changed our lives. So Catherine and I want to give something back. We're donating funds to repair the church roof, and we're establishing a veterinary fund to help ranchers who can't afford treatment for their animals." Surprised murmurs ran through the gathering. Clara Whitman stood, tears in her eyes. "Jessie, Catherine, that's incredibly generous, but you don't owe us anything." Catherine stepped forward. "It's not about owing. It's about community. A year ago, I arrived here with nothing but my father's journal and hope for a fresh start. You gave me that start. You trusted me when you had no reason to defend me when I needed defending, celebrated my successes like they were your own. This is just us doing the same thing, investing in the community that invested in us." Reverend Cole raised his cup. "To the Hardings, may their generosity inspire us all to give as freely as we've received." "To the Hardings," the crowd echoed. As the celebration continued, Jessie found himself standing with Tom Bradley and Marshall Dixon near the barn door. "Never thought I'd see Jessie Harding this happy again," Tom said quietly. "After Sarah died, we all worried about you. Thought maybe you'd given up on life." "I had," Jessie admitted. "Couldn't see a way forward, couldn't imagine wanting to try. Then Catherine showed up and reminded me that life doesn't ask permission to get better. It just does if you let it." Marshall Dixon chuckled. "That woman's something special. Heard she got invited to consult on a horse breeding program in Wyoming. They're offering good money. She's considering it. Wants to expand her knowledge work with different breeds. Jessie watched Catherine teaching a group of children how to properly approach a nervous horse, her patience infinite. I told her to take any opportunity that interests her. Her career matters as much as mine. Not many men would say that, Tom observed. Then not many men deserve women like Catherine. Jessie's voice was firm. She's not my property or my subordinate. She's my partner. Her success is my success. Later that night, after the guests had left and Ella was asleep, Jessie and Catherine stood in the barn with the horses. It was quiet except for the soft sounds of animals settling for the night, the creak of wood in the cold, the whisper of falling snow outside. This time last year, I was in this barn with a dying horse and a broken heart, Jessie said. I thought God had forgotten me. And now I think God was just waiting for the right moment. Waiting for you to be desperate enough to leave Chicago and me to be desperate enough to accept help. Jessie pulled Catherine close. We found each other at exactly the right time. Catherine rested her head against his chest. I used to think I'd never be free, that Thornton's shadow would follow me forever, that I'd always be running or hiding. But you gave me something better than freedom. You gave me purpose and partnership and love. You gave me those things too. You and Ella both. They stood together in the warm barn while outside the winter wind sang through the pines. Willow fully recovered, and Sleek came to the stall door and nuzzled Catherine's hand. The mare that had been dying a year ago was now one of their best breeding prospects. Her foals sought after throughout the territory. Everything comes full circle, Catherine murmured, stroking Willow's nose. We save what we can, we heal what's broken, and we build something stronger than what we started with. Is that from your father's journal? No, that's from experience. On Christmas morning, Ella woke them before dawn, too excited to sleep. She'd made gifts for both of them, drawings mounted on wood that Jessie had helped her frame. For Catherine, she'd drawn the moment they'd first met, a woman with a medical bag standing in a barn doorway, hope and determination in every line. For Jessie, she'd drawn their family as it was now 3 people and a dozen horses all together under a wide Montana sky. These are beautiful, sweetheart, Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. I wanted to remember, Ella said simply, so we never forget how we started. They spent Christmas Day quietly, just the 4 of them, including Mrs. Chen. They cooked together, played games, read aloud from Catherine's father's journal. It was simple and perfect, everything a family celebration should be. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Ella looked up from the book she was reading. Mama Kate, do you think Grandpa Brennan would be happy about me wanting to be a veterinarian? Catherine set down her mending. I think he'd be thrilled. He always said his greatest hope was that his knowledge wouldn't die with him, that it would continue through someone who cared as deeply about animals as he did. But he wanted it to be you. He wanted it to be anyone who would carry it forward with honor and skill. That's you, Ella. You have his gift, his compassion, his dedication. He'd be so proud. Ella was quiet for a moment. I miss having a grandpa. I don't remember Mama Sarah's parents. They died before I was born. Catherine glanced at Jessie, then made a decision. Ella, come here. I want to show you something. She retrieved her father's journal and opened it to the first page. There, in faded ink, James Brennan had written an inscription. Read it aloud, Catherine said. Ella's voice was soft. To whoever carries this forward, you are my legacy. Use this knowledge well, heal what you can, and remember that the greatest gift we can give is to ease suffering wherever we find it. With love and hope, James Brennan. He wrote that the day before he died, Catherine said. He knew I'd carry on his work, but he also knew I might not be the last. He hoped there would be others after me, people who cared about healing, about animals, about doing good work in the world. Like me, Ella whispered. Exactly like you. So you see, you do have a connection to him. Through his words, his wisdom, his journal. He's your grandfather in spirit, even if you never met him in life. Ella traced the inscription with her finger, her face serious and thoughtful. Then she looked up at Catherine with tears in her eyes. Thank you for sharing him with me, and thank you for being my Mama Kate. I know you didn't come here planning to be anyone's mother, but I'm really glad you are. Catherine pulled Ella into her arms, holding her close. Being your mother is the greatest honor of my life, sweetheart. You and your papa both. You're my family in every way that matters. Jesse had to turn away, his own eyes burning. He'd been so afraid after Sarah died that Ella would never have a mother's love again, that she'd grow up missing something essential. But Catherine had filled that space not by trying to replace Sarah, but by being exactly who she was. Strong, wise, compassionate, and unflinchingly herself. As winter deepened, Catherine's reputation continued to grow. She was invited to speak at a veterinary conference in San Francisco, asked to contribute to a textbook on frontier animal medicine, offered a position teaching at a new agricultural college in Oregon. She considered each opportunity, carefully discussing them with Jesse, weighing the benefits against the cost of time away from home. In the end, she accepted the speaking engagement and the textbook contribution, but declined the teaching position. Why? Jesse asked. It's a prestigious offer. Because my life is here. My practice, my family, my community. I can contribute to the field without leaving Montana. Catherine smiled. Besides, I'm training the next generation right here. Ella and the two young men at the clinic, they're learning everything I know. That's legacy enough. Jesse understood. Success wasn't about prestige or recognition. It was about building something meaningful and sustainable, something that would outlast them both. One March afternoon, a year and 4 months after Catherine had first arrived, a letter came from Chicago. Catherine opened it at the kitchen table, Jesse watching her face carefully. It's from Thornton, she said quietly. Jesse tensed. What does he want? Nothing. He's not asking for anything. Catherine read the letter again, her expression unreadable. He's apologizing. Says he realizes now that he was wrong, that he tried to control me out of pride and loneliness, that he's sorry for the pain he caused. Do you believe him? I don't know. Maybe. People can change. Catherine set the letter down. He says he's selling the pharmacy, moving to California to live near his sister. He wanted me to know that he won't bother us again, and he hopes I've found happiness. Have you? Jesse asked. Found happiness? Catherine looked around the kitchen at the herbs hanging from the rafters, at Ella's drawings, covering one wall, at the journal, open on the table, at Jesse himself. Her answer was a smile that transformed her entire face. More than I ever dreamed possible. That spring brought the first crop of foals from their breeding program. Strong, healthy colts and fillies that would eventually join the cavalry or help other ranchers build their own herds. Catherine examined each one with meticulous care, teaching Ella how to assess conformation, how to predict which traits they'd carry forward. This filly, Catherine said, running her hands over a gray foal with intelligent eyes. She's going to be special. See how she's built, the slope of her shoulder, the depth of her chest, and watch how she moves, bold but not reckless. Can we keep her? Ella asked. Train her for me to ride. Catherine glanced at Jesse, who nodded. I think that's a fine idea. She'll be your project, Ella. You'll help train her, care for her, learn from her. Ella named the filly Legacy, and the name seemed perfect. This was what they were building, not just a ranch or a veterinary practice, but a legacy of knowledge and compassion and partnership that would extend far beyond their own lives. As summer approached, Jesse and Catherine sat on the porch one evening, watching Ella work with Legacy in the paddock. The girl moved with confidence, her voice calm and steady, as she led the young horse through basic groundwork. She's going to be extraordinary, Catherine said. Better than me, maybe. She's learning younger, absorbing more. She has an excellent teacher. She has 2 excellent teachers. You've taught her as much as I have, Patience, consistency, respect. Those aren't just veterinary skills, they're life skills. Jesse took Catherine's hand. I want you to know something. Before you came, I was just surviving. Going through the motions, waiting for nothing in particular. You didn't just save my ranch, Catherine. You saved my life. We saved each other. That's how the best partnerships work. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and amber. The horses grazed peacefully. The barn stood strong and well-maintained, and somewhere in the house, Mrs. Chen was preparing dinner. This was what home felt like. Not a place, but a collection of people and purposes, and shared dreams. Catherine had walked into Jesse's life through a winter storm carrying nothing but a medical bag and desperate hope, and together they'd built something that would last beyond storms, beyond seasons, beyond any single lifetime. Jesse, Catherine said suddenly, I never thanked you properly. For taking a chance on me. For believing I was who I claimed to be when you had every reason to doubt. You proved yourself within hours of arriving. I'd have been a fool not to believe you. Still, you could have turned me away that first night. Sent me back to town, told me you'd changed your mind about needing a wife. But you didn't. No. Because the moment you started talking about strangles and treatment protocols, I knew you were real. And when you worked through the night to save Willow without asking for anything in return, I knew you were extraordinary. Jesse brought her hand to his lips. I didn't save you, Catherine. You saved yourself. I just had the good sense to get out of your way and let you. As darkness fell and the first stars emerged, Ella came running up from the paddock, her face flushed with excitement. Mama Kate, Papa, did you see Legacy walked right into the training halter without any fuss? She's learning so fast. That's because she has a good teacher, Catherine said, pulling Ella into a hug. You're doing wonderful work with her, sweetheart. Later, after Ella was asleep and the house was quiet, Jessie found Catherine in her study, reviewing case notes for tomorrow's appointments. She worked by lamplight, her face serious with concentration, occasionally making notes in the margins. You should rest, Jessie said from the doorway. Just finishing up. There's a difficult case tomorrow, infected hoof that's not responding to standard treatment. I want to review my father's notes on alternative approaches. Jessie came to stand behind her, reading over her shoulder. The journal was filled with James Brennan's careful observations, detailed drawings, notes from decades of practice. It was a treasure trove of knowledge, and Catherine had added to it over the past year, documenting her own cases and discoveries. This will be Ella's someday, Catherine said softly. And maybe her daughters after that, or her students. The knowledge keeps growing, keeps passing forward. That's the best kind of legacy. Not money or property, but wisdom earned through experience and shared freely. Catherine closed the journal and stood turning into Jessie's embrace. I love you. I know I don't say it often enough, but I do. More than I have words for. I love you too, always will. They stood together in the small circle of lamplight, while outside the Montana night stretched vast and dark and full of stars. Somewhere in Chicago, Tobias Thornton was packing his belongings and preparing to start over. Somewhere in the barn, horses slept peacefully healthy and cared for. Somewhere down the hall, a child dreamed of following in her grandfather's footsteps. And here, in this quiet room, two people who'd married for practical reasons held each other with a love that had grown from respect and partnership and shared purpose into something profound and unbreakable. Jesse thought back to that desperate prayer he'd whispered a year and a half ago when he'd asked God for a sign for any reason to keep fighting. He'd thought he needed a miracle. What he'd gotten was better. He'd gotten Catherine Brennan stubborn and skilled and utterly unwilling to let anything die without a fight, including him. She'd arrived with nothing but knowledge and courage, and together they'd built a life that mattered. A ranch that thrived, a practice that healed a family that loved each other, not despite their differences, but because of them. That was the real miracle. Not divine intervention, but two broken people choosing to trust each other, to work together, to build something better than either could have created alone. "Ready for bed?" Catherine asked, her voice drowsy. "Ready." They walked upstairs hand in hand, checked on Ella one last time, the child sleeping with Legacy's halter beside her pillow and James Brennan's journal on her nightstand, and then went to their own room. As Jesse drifted toward sleep, Catherine's head on his shoulder, and her breathing already slow and even, he whispered one final prayer. Not a plea this time, but gratitude. "Thank you for sending her. Thank you for second chances. Thank you for showing me that the best answers to prayers don't always come in the form we expect." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, covering the world in silence. But inside the Harding Ranch, there was warmth and life and love enough to last through any winter, through any storm, through anything the frontier could throw at them. Because they'd learned the most important truth of all healing starts when someone believes things can be fixed again. And from that belief, everything else follows.